The Johannesburg High Court has granted both parents maternity leave. The court ruled that parents are now allowed to share the 4 months leave as they see fit, so between themselves. And this ruling comes after a family took legal action against the Labour Department over inconsistencies in the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So the Act gave mothers 4 months maternity leave, that's birth mothers, and fathers just 10 days from the day of when the child is born. Now, the Commission for Gender Equality and Sonke Gender Justice were also applicants in this matter. In fact, Sonke Gender Justice's Bafana Khumalo joins us this morning alongside the main applicants in this case, Werner and van Wyk. To all of our guests, thank you so much for joining us. Werner and I want to begin with you this morning and ask you, was this the first child you were having? Just give us some background to what eventually led you essentially taking this up with the courts.
Morning, Michelle. Yes, indeed. After being married a couple of years, Werner and I finally decided to start a family, and it was while we were expecting our first little one that we realized our specific situation, where I was a business owner and Werner was in corporate employment, wouldn't allow us to divvy up maternity leave to suit our needs or to support our family sufficiently. And that's when we started the process.
Amazing. And I don't imagine that you're the first couple to go through this, although you are the first couple to get this kind of outcome in the courts. Were you surprised that actually the judgment did go in your favor? Were you hoping it would go even further than it has?
Michelle, I wouldn't say we were surprised. I think we were expecting and hoping for it.
Yeah.
In terms of going far enough, I think personally what the judges has ruled, we think strikes a fair balance between what gives flexibility to the family and the financial situation in which South Africa finds itself. Personally, I would love if all parents got 12, 24 months worth of maternity leave to look after a child. I think looking after a child is very important, but there are certain realities that South Africa faces, which countries like, for example, Sweden or Australia simply doesn't.
Yeah.
So I think this strikes a fair balance and essentially maximizes what we can do with what we already have by just saying parents can now share that 4 months.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important point, because one thing that the court did say is that it wouldn't give both parents, for example, 4 months of maternity leave. It does make that distinction, right? That you get 4 months as a unit, but you get to decide how you divvy that up.
Correct. That's correct.
So let's bring in this co-executive director at Sonke Gender Justice, Bafana Khumalo. It's great to talk to you this morning. And it's about time, right, that we've had a ruling like this. Werner and van Wyk describing, and I'm sure you're aware of their work-life situation in preparing to have a child. Obviously, they're not the first couple to have to go through something like that. But it's about time that the Basic Conditions of Employment Act does recognize this essential discrimination between mothers and fathers. It's discrimination between birth mothers and other mothers and parents as well.
Indeed, Michelle, we need to congratulate the Van Wyks, because they are taking our country forward with regards to, advancing our jurisprudence in relation to care work and equal access to that. And I think it is brave of the Van Wyks to have taken this up, because particularly for us men, for Mr. Van Wyk to take an option to avail himself to look after his child and contribute towards the rearing of the child, understandably because the partner is engaged in critical economic engagements, is recognition of the role that we as men need to show up in the bringing up of our children.
Yeah.
We of course, I think, are not too happy, much as we are excited that we got most of what we wanted. We would have loved the 4x4, but we understand, that the country where it is, we cannot afford that necessarily. But it is a good step in the right direction, and we are sure that in future it will gravitate towards ensuring that, parents have got more time to bond with their children, because we know that evidence shows that where parents spend quality time in the upbringing of their children, that has positive spin-offs in the development of the children.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this judgment really does take us forward in many respects.
It really does, Bafana, especially in the discrimination between birth mothers and adoptive mothers. Essentially, what the judge was saying is it doesn't matter how you become a parent, right?
Exactly.
There should be no discrimination over how that child came into your life. You should get the same amount of time. There was a 10-week provision, I believe, previously, or there is a 10-week provision in the current Act, as it is now, previously for adoptive mothers, rather than the 16-week period given for birth mothers. I mean, that's a major victory as well.
It is a major victory because it actually confirms our constitutional provision that we should provide equal rights for all parents, irrespective of their gender, sexuality, and I think it is significant in that regard. But it's also significant in that, as you are aware, Michelle, as men, we could not even access, unemployment insurance during this period, even though we contribute to the fund, which was an anomaly, because this is not like, people asking for a free rein in accessing resources, but we do contribute equally, to UIF as employed men. And so it is incredible that, the legislation was specifically refusing for men to access that facility. And I think this is very important. Of course, what we are asking for in many companies like my own is for companies to also show up. Because if we take, bringing up of children as a very important social contribution, we should be, as companies, be considering to provide that support to parents so that they are able to play the role that they should be playing. At Sonke, for instance, we don't ask any of our staff to go to the unemployment insurance fund because we budget for that ourselves and ensure that we provide 100% for the period of parental leave. And we think this is possible. It's just a matter of companies looking at their investment in what we consider to be an important social contribution by parents in our society.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the Act as it was before, Werner, men, or you would have gotten in this case, a paltry 10 days of paternity leave, right? With the decision from the court, and maybe this is a difficult question for you to answer on a national news network, but what Bafana is talking about there, companies actually showing up. How did your company take, the ruling from the court around equal leave for both partners?
Since we started this process, our family situation has changed a lot. So we've moved from, I've left my employer. My new employer is my wife. So hopefully she is happy with the ruling.
And she keeps you leave.
Yeah. I think, speaking about companies broadly, if you look at the trends internationally, where other countries where they've got similar arrangements where you can have shared leave, what they found there is, as is to be expected, it's not like there's an influx of men taking this up. It's still the minority of men that take up shared maternity leave. But there's still a stigma attached to it. So I think one of the things that corporate employers can start doing now is to try and remove that stigma that comes with men who would like to take leave to support their wives, and also women who want to come back to work and would rather have a child but also have a career in corporate or other employment.
Yeah, absolutely. The point is there shouldn't be this discrimination, right, which is exactly what the judge has said, Eka, because in your case, you now are your husband's employer, but in your case, when you first took this case to court, you would have perhaps wanted to decide when you go back to work, and maybe that would have been much sooner than the 4 months.
Absolutely. I mean, there was definitely a lot of anxiety at the time because I had two small up-and-coming businesses, and the best thing for us would have been for Werner to have taken the full stretch of maternity leave so that I could continue, because in my world, not being there in person meant that we closed the doors. You can only, you can only ask your customers to wait for you for so long while you are busy with personal stuff. So I kind of had a 2-week gap, which was for the most part just getting home and settling in with the newborn. And then I was back at it. And I was happy to be back at it, but it was really tough. So the fact that Werner had to pull some strings and get creative with how he was able to take leave to be more hands-on with the baby and to support me during that time was a godsend. But we realized that not everyone has the ability to do that. The fact that Werner had worked for his employer for over a decade and he managed to bank a lot of leave, like all of those factors came into play. If it wasn't for that, I might have lost my businesses.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely. Well, trailblazers that you are, Ika and Werner van Wyk, thank you so much for your time. And it was their story that essentially led to this decision in the High Court granting equal parental leave to parents, no matter how that child comes into their lives. Bafana Khumalo, thanks as well for weighing in on this story with Sonke Gender Justice. An incredible story which I'm sure will have wide-ranging implications for future parents.